Coming soon to Let's Find Out with Diego. Imagine a world woven from ancient secrets and mystical power, a world that demands a prophecy to be awakened. Today, we delve into the mind behind such tales, an award-winning author whose journey into storytelling began within the pages of childhood books, whispers from avid reader parents, and the Scholastic Book Program. She emerged with Immortal Wounds in 2022, followed by the gripping of Prophecy Awakened in 2024. Her narratives blur the lines between fantasy, thriller, and even romance. All this plus more.
When you step into the danger zone, you don't stop listening. It's Let's Find Out with Diego. Step into it. Ooh, yeah!
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
All systems go.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, do the myths of towering beings from ancient times hold a grain of truth? Our guest has dedicated his career to uncovering the mysteries to our past. He's an author, freelance journalist, and a former producer of Archaeology TV. And here to challenge our understanding of history, his work consistently explores the tantalizing evidence for prehistoric giants, from the Greek Titans to biblical Nephilim, often unearthing what he calls suppressed archaeological discoveries. All this plus more. Please welcome a new friend to our show and first-time guest, Patrick Chouinard. Patrick, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out.
No, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with you and your listeners.
Oh, thank you, my friend. I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time to actually get to talk to you and meet you. As I was on the pre-interview, I was showing you the books that I have from you that I've read multiple times, and each time I read the books, I learn something new. So many facts in there from the ancient past to our times that we're going to definitely dive into that right now. But interesting, our lives sometimes take a path and we go on this journey. During your lifetime, was this always your path to discover this what we like to call suppressed history of ancient archaeology, whether it's from Nephilim and giants? Was this always your goal?
No, not at all. I mean, when I was really young, my main aspiration was to be a paleontologist. And then later on, of course, my great aspiration was to go to war and be a conqueror because I was, a kid and I was into G.I. Joe and Army and all that type of stuff. I was real heavily into World War II history and that. Then for a while, I kind of got into music and did the usual teenage thing like anybody else. But it was in my 20s that I really started to watch a lot of the Discovery Channel, History Channel um, TV shows. They're like the 10 best mysterious places and the 10 most ancient archaeological sites. And, on the Travel Channel and the History Channel came about, started some of the old History Channel before it became, um, reality TV back before Ancient Aliens and all that, when they had real, hardcore history programs and they were talking about lost civilizations and that. I was a big fan. And then that's what got me started researching alternative history, like, Graham Hancock and so forth and so on. And then once I got down that path, I was dedicated to that. Now, over the past few years, a number of things have happened. And this is why there's been a gap in my writing. The first thing that happened is my mother passed away, and I struggled with both mental and physical illness for a long time. And I went down paths and made choices in my career and in my own personal convictions that now I regret. And they happened. I made statements which I wish I hadn't, but I did. Everybody makes those choices in life. and everybody evolves over time. Now, the evolution is I came back to square one, back to my original passions that were in me back since my 20s. I'm now writing ancient mysteries, my great love. I'm heavily involved in the LDS Church again, which is my strongest faith, my church family, and I'm proud of it. And also, I have been for the past few years, about past decade actually, after I settled my housing situation and moved to Arkansas. Uh, I have been a student at Arizona State University online. I have an associate degree in creative media. I have um, a bachelor's in art history and anthropology, and I'm working on a graduate degree at present. So all those things have coalesced in a relatively short period of time. But the dedication it takes to hold a full uh, academic career, and at the same time, before that, a 4 year period, deal with a lot of emotional issues and how we say misdirected loyalties, getting into extreme viewpoints that you regret. It's difficult. And I'm only really thankful to my own strength and determination and my own faith that allowed me to get back to a productive state that's really working out for me. But I've always had an interest in the unusual, whether it was, uh, Ripley's Believe It or Not, or Charles Fort. I'm not sure you know who that is.
No, I
Or
have not heard.
T. Lovecraft. Well, Fort was back in the early 20th century. Was a big guy with parts, out of place artifacts, and he used to talk about, when you like the golden plains of South America, the plains that Giorgio Tsoukalos has pinned to his suit, stuff
Hmm.
like that, or the Baghdad battery, or the ancient Sicurian device. Those would be parts, or the Egyptian temple light bulb, another example of that. Or there's a in Romania there's a tin artifact. They don't know exactly what it is, but it's made out of aluminum or something, which according to any uh, knowledgeable person shouldn't be existing 50,000 years ago on Earth. So all these are out of place artifacts. And he didn't just hit on that, he hit on reports of odd lights in the sky, reports of giants. So all that. And as far as the Ripley's, believe it or not, you go to any of their museums, you'll see a full scale display of giant bones or giant people. So all that really fascinated me. But I do believe that this whole thing about giants really began with an advanced earthly civilization in which the people who belonged to this civilization were just uniquely tall humans and robust figures, like 6'1" to 7 foot in height, which to the average human being at that time, who might be 5'5", 5'6", these people would be giants. These tall, like a basketball player of today's time who can basically walk under the rim and touch it with its outstretched arm. I mean, that would be a giant to someone who was 5'5" back in that time and not really exposed to many large people. Well, eventually, these people, who I say are kind of Caucasian like, fair skin, maybe with red hair or blonde hair, eventually became defined in the mythology of other peoples as giants. And if you look at so much of the mythology, specifically East Asia, the Pacific America, you see these legends of these giants, fair skinned giants that brought knowledge and culture to their civilizations. And I talk about this in the two books you have there. And like Quetzalcoatl, perfect example. And then you have Amaterasu in Japanese lore, the sun goddess who's radiant and has fair skin and is described as very Nordic like. So you have all these myths and traditions of people preserved throughout China, throughout Africa, and even, of course, Europe and India. They have, the whether it's the Aesir or the Olympians or the pantheon of gods in Indian mythology, Hindu. It's there, and the motif of the giant is interlocked with the motif of the god or the goddess. Because if they are gods or goddesses, they're also larger than life. They are gods and they are giants. So that's really what I've become to understand about the giant mythos, the linkage there.
So, in a sense, what when we're talking about giants, and it's been your experience and your research, we're talking about a pre-Adamic race, sort of say, of human
Yes,
beings.
yes, most definitely.
So it seems though, and going back because you're going back, mentioned earlier, going back to your faith, and back in my church days, where some of these things were not, let's say we were not allowed to talk, but nobody really want to hear about it. You only really heard about these things when different groups of people would have side conversations or have their own Bible studies in their own homes. And I think it was one time where somebody mentioned to me talking about fallen angels, Nephilim, and stuff, and it
Yeah,
really didn't hit my brain didn't really understand it at that point, because if I'm looking at the at my Bible, I'm like, I'm not really sure what they're talking about. Little did I know, years down the road, I actually discovered. No, I didn't discover it; it's already there. But the Book of Enoch,
yeah.
and I think that kind of opened up a lot of the mystery in between, fill up some of the gaps. But the giants you're speaking of, are different than, I guess, we're talking about Nephilim and those types, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's more in line with what the Talmud in the Zohar in Jewish mystical tradition talks about. Um, they talk about a pre-Adamic civilizations that lived before there were kings in Israel, and that's a line from the Bible. And it is, the Talmud is really a rabbinical commentary most of the Bible, as well as other aspects that relate to Jewish religion. The Zohar is the text associated with the Kabbalist tradition, and both of them are very emphatic that there were pre-Adamic civilizations, civilizations and peoples that predated the creation of Adam. I don't know if you want to go in that literally or symbolically, but I use it as a foil to present a what if, and and that's my main focus is to generate a discussion and to present multiple information across cultures that really make people say, you got to go figure. You got to think beyond the box. And that's basically what I'm trying to do by presenting the possibility that there were civilizations before our own world. And I think, I was talking a little bit about the LDS faith. Well, it is true that Joseph Smith taught about the plurality of worlds in a very mystical sense. And there is, of course, with the creation in the Book of Abraham and the Pearl of Great Price, uh, account of the council of the gods creating the earth. So that sounds almost, I hate to say this, I don't want to, I don't want to box myself in to have a call from the prophet tomorrow, But I would say that that sounds very extraterrestrial in nature, and very, very interesting when you look at it from that perspective. There's a lot of things in the LDS faith that I found in my journey that are very mystical and very much relate to discussions of other worlds and civilizations beyond our own.
And that's it's fair to say because it's my understanding. Also, I think that was my book. Zachariah Sitchin when he translated um, the cuneiforms and then came out the called the Lost Book of Anki, right? And it talks about same thing you spoke about extraterrestrial lineage of sorts where they created certain beings to be worker class, and perhaps that's where we generated from. But a lot of the
Well, I don't believe that. I think he
okay,
was wrong because, you know, if you want to go from it biblically or Talmudically or Book of Mormonly, if you want to say it that way, there is this. You know, recognition that Adam was created as the earth's ruler to have complete dominion over the earth to succeed the fallen angel of Lucifer, who prior to the creation of Adam was supposed to be the representative thereof. And Adam had complete intelligence. He was the master of all that, not just the Garden of Eden, but the whole earth. And so, um, he wasn't created as a slave with no mind. And if, if the if the aliens wanted to create a slave race, the last thing they would do would give us intelligence of any kind. They would make us mindless, you know. They wouldn't create a powerful underclass with curiosity and independence and then suggest, oh, now we're just going to leave them here. That wouldn't happen. So it's more than likely that they would use their technology to build robots or something like that, something that was technological, that would function as such, but wouldn't have a biological presence or independent mind. I think that whole idea just doesn't jive with me. I don't buy into the Anunnaki, mankind as a race of slaves. I think if aliens did want to uh, modify us, it would be to make us their successors, to make us powerful like them, and to be their inheritors on earth the way the God of the Bible does. I don't think they'd want to make us into slaves. I don't think that would, if they did do that, I don't think that would be their ultimate goal.
right? When you put it like that, it kind of makes me think. The movie Terminator comes to mind, to where they created humankind, but eventually humankind conquered everything. Kind of like an experiment gone wrong in a way. But like you said, why would they build? Why would they create something that would eventually be smarter than them or be able to revolt, right? And
Yeah.
then where they could have used machines to do these kind of things. But one of the more interesting questions I receive, and when I talk about giants, um, a lot of people say, "Well, what happened to them?" Because there's no evidence. I highly disagree that there is no evidence. But let's go back to what happened to this ancient race. And the thing I could think about is like a either war amongst them, kind of like their own Ragnarok or a Twilight of the Gods thing happened where did they wipe each other out? What happened?
Well, I do believe a catastrophe eliminated them. I do believe there was a great flood, and I do believe that the great flood eliminated most of them. I do believe there were survivors, and in the interim period after the great flood, when the great rebuilding happened, I believe there were giants on the earth. And then, like all things, I think maybe disease or war wiped them out. Now, as far as the evidence, it's up to using oral tradition and scripture to really gauge our history of the giants. They're just like you said. They're just, and I'll admit this. There's just really no physical evidence. There was tons of evidence in the 19th and the early 20th century. There are a lot of reports of giant bones, mummies, so forth and so on. Then they disappear. They say the Smithsonian confiscated them. But that's, we don't know for sure. That's what people say, but there's nothing there to prove it. And then, you had those discoveries. I discussed them in my first Giants book. All these discoveries that are happening all around the world where great skeletons are found, and suddenly there's a rush of government officials, and then you don't hear anything more of it. So it's a sad thing. It's like the UFO phenomenon. There's plenty of eyewitness accounts, plenty of reports, and plenty of rumors about Area 51. But in all this, have we ever actually had the craft, the body, a video where you're actually going into the craft, you're taking video of inside. It could be, the video can be examined. It's not just some blurry light in the sky. It's something tangible. We don't have that. So it's a frustrating and it's a bittersweet reality. You just don't have the evidence. I like to say the what if, but that's as far as I can go.
But there seems to be an uptick now with reports of UFOs, some call them UAPs and what have you.
Yeah.
And also, people who have claimed to have been either abducted or experimented on by extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
So in a sense, we have to rely on their testimony to, I guess, fill in the gaps because, I mean, realistically, unless
Rigorous when we get those reports, we can't just take them at face value. I think the logical thing would be to be very rigorous and skeptical too. I don't think we should dismiss them like some scientists do, but I think we should be hesitant to just say, okay, yeah, you said you were abducted, so you were abducted. You don't know for sure. Could be not.
same thing with in that same kind of a universe with reports of sightings of Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
And there are people that would say they're more human. Some people say they're more beast. Are these some sort of? And I put this out there sometimes. Is this reports of Bigfoot? Let's say 100% this Bigfoot exists, Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever side of the world they call it something different. Would they be linked to these ancient giants, where are more like a devolved version of them, or is
Yeah,
this completely
I
something
put
different?
that out in Lost Race of the Giants and in Giants of Atlantis. Um, there was the gigantic Pithecus, which was a large hominid of giant stature. I mean, he was more than just 7 foot. He was like 15 feet tall, a gigantic ape, just towering above human beings. And he was contemporaneous with ancient humans. And so, yeah, if he survived, then that could be the ancestor of Bigfoot. Bigfoot could be a descendant of him. And he could definitely have gone across the land bridge from Asia to North America and survived in a dense forest. That's more than possible. I'm working on another book called The Cryptid Imperative. And I talk about not only cryptids existing on Earth, but that they are associated, their appearances are associated with uh, certain magnetic forces and guided by certain ley lines across the planet. And these, of course, are linked to UFOs and extraterrestrial forces. So I kind of go all off in this book that I'm planning to do, and but yeah, in a way, I almost buy into the Bigfoot narrative even more so than I buy into the UFO narrative. And I do, to some extent, buy into the UFO narrative because Bigfoot is earthly. He's something tangible. He is a human like being that just seems so much almost like you can prove it. And unlike some UFO reports, you have even more evidence with a Bigfoot because you get footprints, fecal material, uh, hair, and then many people have tested this here, given it a DNA test, and they do come up with it. It's a very unusual DNA signature. So, and I took this information, and I also talk about, being creatures like the Loch Ness Monster and the Kraken and, you know, uh, the, Champ and Lake Champlain. And I talk about a number of classic cryptids and then some that haven't been widely known, like the Yowie of Australia and the skunk ape in Florida. So I talk about that. Now, while we're talking about cryptids, I have a book that came out in April and it's going to be promoted this October. Haunted Heritage, the European Roots of Halloween. And in it, I have a whole chapter based on the Mothman. And then I also have a whole chapter based on Bigfoot. So it's very interesting, and it talks all about the not just the origins of Halloween from the Celtic aspect, but also talks about Germanic and Slavic roots with similar holidays in those cultures. Talks about pop culture, movies, TV, folklore, things that we would readily identify today as Halloween. We get really into it, talk about the slasher films. It's just a really enjoyable romp around the whole holiday with various things talked about. I just came out with a book called Caucasian Mummies of China, East Asia's Mysterious Forgotten Peoples. And it's available on iBooks and Smashwords and several other platforms. Most of the, and also Barnes and Noble Nook. So if you want to get that book, it's also going to be available on Amazon pretty soon.
Which reminds me now, because you mentioned about the mummies, and I might have heard about this. I'm gonna about this ancient race or the city called, was it called Tool or Thule? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Fool, exactly.
Is there a connection between those mummies and Thule?
No, they're connected to the ancient North Eurasians in Siberia. But in Giants of Atlantis, I discuss Thule in 3 different chapters. So it goes into Thule extensively and covers even more material than it was covered in Forgotten Worlds. Forgotten Worlds, I did touch upon it, but in Giants of Atlantis, I go into it extensively, and then also have a chapter devoted to Antarctica and giant ruins beneath the ice there.
And that reminds me of, what is your opinion of the? Oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank? It's very embarrassing. Was it Admiral Byrd
Yes.
and his journey into Antarctica and what he encountered there? What is your opinions on that? I mean, I love reading about it, and there's a lot of people saying no, the diary was all fraudulent, but I don't think so. I think there's something to this.
Well, we know that 2 boats were sent to Antarctica by the Germans to scout out a possible refuge for National Socialist leaders toward the end of the war, which might want to hide any type of Allied retribution. So they did send people down there. And the myth of the situation is that they wanted to go ahead and destroy this enclave of Nazis that were down in Antarctica. And so they sent several ships with some troops and they were going to go do this. And they got there and instead found out that the Nazis had commandeered UFOs from a hidden UFO base that was there extraterrestrial, and they were flying out, and there was a big battle and all that. I can't even really imagine whether that's true or not. I would say it's false, but who knows? And but the other evidence, and a lot of that evidence was brought up by Linda Bolton Howe. She did extensive research and believes that there is an extraterrestrial base underneath Antarctica. I would say she's right to some extent. I would say she's right about a base there. However, I would seem to link it more to an Earth based giant civilization or former human civilization that might have either ruins beneath the ice or might still be active because they did do research in Lake Vostok, which is a ice overed lake in the middle of Antarctica, freshwater lake, and underneath the ice at the very bottom, and it goes down several miles in the soil. There were a whole ecosystem, and they're getting nutrients from the soil rather than photosynthesis. And there's a vast active ecosystem there that, despite this frigid cold and this darkness and lack of sunlight, exists greatly. And I would imagine that in those caves and in those vast areas underneath the ice, there's got to be some hidden secrets because the way the governments that do have bases there act, they're always, and Linda Moulton Howe kind of showed this up and had some whistleblowers on a few of the documentaries she co-hosted that the government acts very strangely, orders them to immediately change direction when they're flying over certain areas. And I'd like to know what it is, that the government is hiding in Antarctica. If it's just research, like weather research now, why would there be such a insistence to hide something? What a value could be there if it's nothing but snow and ice?
I mean, unless, and I just remember what it was, Operation High Jump that escaped. I think that's what it
Yeah.
was with Bird. Uh, Possibility of it would be a game changing exploration if someone would to find something. Now, I heard something about that. There's a possibility that there is a miles of land there where it's not frozen, but it's more of a tropical-ish kind of thing, or that there's
Underneath
actually
the ice,
Antarctica is.
so there is geophysical activity there, which would warm certain parts of beneath the ice, making it very warm and balmy in there due to the geophysical activity. So I heard that they had geophysical activity that they doubted existed in Antarctica, but it actually does. It's, for instance, on the moon. They're speculating now that there's areas in the moon that actually have its own atmosphere, not on top, but below the surface. So if we were to go through one of those craters and into those areas, we would be able to breathe because it has underground atmosphere. And so that's one of the craters. So that's actually a very fascinating reality that there is breathable spots beneath the moon's surface where colonies could thrive. And the same thing could be true in Antarctica. There could be areas beneath the ice where geophysical activity creates a situation where it's much warmer and much more conducive to life, where you're not going to have to be bundled up or facing these freezing temperatures, but be able to live quite comfortably, and that there would be a thriving ecosystem.
And that brings to mind, now you mentioned, I'm not talking about inner Earth theory. I'm not sold on that quite yet. But what I've read and things that I've heard speeches and lectures from people where either some of the giants or a reptilian race went underground, where it's more suitable for them to survive and live. Is that something maybe along those lines a possibility?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. It would kind of explain a lot of like Bigfoot sightings also, where they can get around the forest and these mountains and then they kind of disappear. My opinion is they use a cave system, not as much portals. I'm not really sold on that quite yet, but I mean, it's all possible. That's what I like about your books. You're throwing out there is the possibility. Here's why it could be possible. And during your studies and research, have you ever had any type of experiences yourself? Have you
No,
ever seen?
haven't.
No.
I I never. No, I won't say that. There is one thing that I have experienced, and that wasn't a UFO, wasn't a cryptid, but I've had multiple experiences with the paranormal. I used to live in a haunted house when I was a young boy. And it was haunted. When they sold us the house, they said there was a presence in the house. And I firmly believe in ghosts. And I've seen and felt things in that house that scared me to death as a young kid. And I've seen apparitions. I felt cold spots. I've been in closets that you just feel this overwhelming presence, and heard things at night, moans and so forth and so on. I got to the point that we all wanted to get the heck out of that house.
And now, as years later, did you look into that house or the history of it? What was going on there? Do you know
No, I
now?
never really found out any about any history, and the people who sold us didn't know the history either. The only thing I can say is, and it was an old house. It was built in 1917. I still like the house. I miss it sometimes. It was a very cool looking house. Had a lot of nice features. I had a lot of good times there. Lived there for a few years, and we had a great property there, a huge Olympic-sized pool, a back house which we made into a fake haunted house at Halloween, and invited a whole city basically to come and see. And so we had a lot of fun at that house, a lot of good memories. But at the same time, it was very creepy all the time to be in that house. And it was both pleasurable and very anxiety building.
You know, I can definitely see what you're talking about because I've had similar experiences and I've written about it, but it's one of those, people say they don't believe until it happens to them. It's a game changer. And the reason I say that is talking about the subject we're talking about, ancient giants, we're talking about Atlantis, we're talking about lost races, we're talking about cryptids. So let's say we found that gem that there's no discussing, there's no argument. We find the artifact, and the world now knows that there was an ancient civilizations of giants. How much would our lives change knowing this?
I would really like to ask what would. Would we change the society? I think we would just adapt our records and move on the same path that we have been doing. I don't think it would change that much. I mean, look at this. Back in the early 90s, Robert Schoch and John Anthony West were presenting their findings about the Sphinx, that it was far older than Egyptologists had been saying, and it was from a previous civilization. Mark later, the Egyptologist, said, I understand your compelling evidence, but if it's true, where's the pot shard? Where's the smoking gun? Where's the evidence of such a civilization that existed before 3,000 years ago, 3,000 BC? Well, just a couple of years go by and they discover Göbekli Tepe, an 11,600-year-old site that predated anything that we could imagine. And did that really change? Hardly change the minds of the archaeologists. They just said, oh, yeah, 11,600, earliest we know. But, it's not showing signs of true civilization. It must have just been some hunter gatherers cooperating. Really didn't change their opinion about anything. They still put in all the textbooks that Egypt and Mesopotamia were the oldest civilizations. Never talked about the speculations that Graham Hancock and others brought up. Really didn't change much. And did our society change? We're still doing the same stupid stuff we've been doing forever. It really doesn't change because what we learned, we adapt with, and then we continue to make the same stupid choices as a society. I mean, just look now. Tons of stupid stuff is going on that is so blatantly Orwellian and left wing. I can't imagine it.
Along those lines, I just think that the majority are just too distracted with other things
Yeah.
to really grasp it or even start caring. Not that it's not important, but I think people are too busy to care because they're either too busy being entertained or on their phone or given the next story.
Yeah. And that's basically what I'm trying to say. I mean, they just aren't affected. They'll just go on and, obsess about their football games and their TikTok and whatever, and their dances, moves, and their music. And, I would like to see when we make discoveries that the general public really thinks of ways they can apply that to learning more about themselves as human beings. And they don't do that. They just either ignore it or they're skeptical and they say, oh, well, it doesn't say that here. I don't believe that. And then it just gets basically taken from any type of notoriety and they forget about it.
That's true. We quickly forget about a lot of things, even if it just happened 50 to 100 years ago.
Yeah.
We forget, we move on, we adapt, but I think we adapt incorrectly in a way. Not to get preachy, but I think that it's good for us to know where we came from and know more about our history beyond the 5,000 years ago, because we're talking about 10, 20, possibly longer.
Well, let me tell you a personal story. I'm adopted, and my mother, my adopted mother, chose to fabricate a story that I was her biological son, and it was very detailed. And so when I found out as an adult that I was adopted, I felt betrayed because all I really wanted to know, I didn't care about who my parents were. I cared about what my heritage was and what my background was and where my roots were. And basically now, I have to get a DNA test to go all the way back and try to recreate those roots just to know where I was. I mean, it doesn't change the reality that I love my father and my father's my father. I just don't know my roots. And then when you have that experience like I did, you know how precious that can be to understand where you came from and what took place before you. It's a very personal and very important part of your life, whether you're talking about an individual heritage or whether you're talking about the heritage of your nation or the whole heritage of the world. It is a very, very important aspect of forging any form of identity.
You're right about that. I think it's good to learn these things. The type of work that you do is very important. I think it gives us something to look back on, and we might learn some sort of moral lesson from it in a way to not repeat the mistakes that these giants may have done in the past or our forefathers. And for someone who would be interested in learning more about not just their lineage or history of their people, but history of their country or Earth, going back to giants and what have you, what would you recommend them to look to first? Are there any locations or any books that you could recommend somebody just getting into this frame of mind?
Well, I look into my books definitely, and I have to say that because I wrote them and I want to promote them. But, I think there's a lot of authors out there who are really taking them up the mantle of developing a new perspective, a new history. And that goes from, Frank Joseph to Graham Hancock to Robert Schoch, Andrew Collins, Hugh Newman. Any of those individuals have already put forth a number of publications, a number of books with well-known publishers that are really exceptional. I have to say their work is impressive. I've used them as sources in my books, and they have the primers for this whole argument. And also David Childress. I will say that he's done a remarkable job in researching, and he actually inspired me to start writing about giants because he did a little bit of work on that in a number of his books, and I just was fascinated by it and started doing the research from there and slowly developing a backlog of writings about giants.
And along those lines, are you going to be doing any lectures this year? Are you going to be putting out any videos in order
I'm
to?
probably not till next year. I'm just
Okay.
getting ready to relaunch everything and get the books I've developed over the past few years published and get back on my game.
Excellent. And now for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about you and your books, where can they go find this information?
Yeah, go to www.patrickchouinard.com. That's PatrickChouinard.com. Or go to Amazon. I have an author's page there. And go to Patrick Chouinard, do a search there. You should see all my books right there.
Excellent. And then I know you mentioned that you're going to be releasing a new book very soon, focusing on some of the cryptids, correct?
Yes.
And before we go, it's kind of like somebody asks you, who's your favorite football team? So let me ask you this: out of the research that you've done and learned about these cryptids, which one of them stands out the most to you? Which one's the ones that you were?
I like the Mothman. Yeah, I'm a big Mothman fan.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point too, actually, because I'm in West Virginia, so 5 hours south of here is that Mothman Museum. It's on my bucket list, and they got the statue there. You're supposed to touch the hiney on it for some reason. It's part of the ritual, right?
Yeah. Another thing on my bucket list is America's Stonehenge. I really want to go there. Favorite football team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh, I think I know why.
Yep.
Awesome, my friend. But thank you so much for being on Let's Find Out. I've been looking forward to talking to you for many years, and I'm glad I have you on. And if you don't mind, I know that we're more than halfway through 2025, but I want to bring you back. Once you release the book and it's been out for a few months, I like to come back and talk about it and learn more about what other cryptids you're talking about in the book. Is only in the United States. I mean, just there's so many of them. We'll talk about them.
Okay, great. I'd love to.
Thank you, my friend.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.